Hi there. Welcome to the Junior Book Club Read Aloud. This month's book for Junior Book Club is Stuffed by Liz Braswell. Chapter 1, Night. Tomorrow, summer began. Tomorrow, summer stretched 3 green months into the future, wide and open like a storybook landscape, or like a monopoly board with the months in one pleasant block, waiting for hotels. 4th grade ended tomorrow. A nearly infinite sunny time approached for Clark, full of reading as many books as he wanted, playing in the backyard until he was called in, afternoons at the pool, and, if he was lucky, sometimes the lake. Time would be marked by meals, not bells, and meals would sometimes be picnics or surprise outings to the Tasty Freeze. Most importantly, summer meant the longest days and the shortest nights. But all that began tomorrow. Right now it was still tonight, and night was creeping in. Mrs. Smith speared a ravioli on her fork, a bright grin on her face. So, tomorrow, last day of school, what next, team? What are your big plans for June, July, and August? Clark's sister Anna rolled her heavily made-up eyes and nudged him in the stomach with her elbow. She was 16, but mostly treated him like an equal. Clark rolled his eyes back at her. It was a nice distraction from watching the light fade beyond the windows. Mrs. Smith looked at Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith did not return her look. He just spooned ravioli into his mouth, trying not to get any sauce on his mustache. Come on, guys, Miss Smith tried again. You have all of summer ahead of you. Big plans, big projects. The world is your oyster. I thought I'd take up taxidermy, Anna said. Miss Smith, her mother growled. Don't even joke. Clark knew that Anna would probably do the same thing she did every summer. She would wear her seasonally inappropriate dark and heavy clothes and hang around with her friends, who were always inappropriate no matter what season it was. She wouldn't really do anything unless she could get one of the coveted jobs at Hot Topic. What about you, Clark? His mother asked. First, I'm going to finish that Dragons of the Realm series. After that, I'll try Cursed Child again. If you let me, I'm going to go to the library every day on my bike. He was so excited by the imaginary stack of books waiting for him that at first he didn't notice his audience's reaction. His mother was staring at him silently. So was his dad, but his gaze was slightly off-center. Whoops, he should have said something like, learn to swim the breaststroke properly, or teach myself chess, but the opportunity was past. Mrs. Smith took a deep breath. You guys, come on. You're young. This is summer. You're kids. Don't waste it. We're not wasting it, Anna drawled. We're doing exactly what we're supposed to do. As kids, hang out and have fun. Miss Smith narrowed her eyes and bit her lip, but she didn't say anything. Mr. Smith kept eating his ravioli. After TV, it was time for bed. It's still a school night, no partying yet. Darkness finally and completely overcame the yard outside. Clark brushed his teeth as fast as he could impede, remembering to lower the seat carefully so it didn't crash. He ran a hand through his shaggy brown hair to keep it from becoming too tangled or weird by morning, forcing Mom to bring out the brush. In his parents' bathroom, Mrs. Smith was cleaning her own teeth for exactly 2 minutes with the help of a timer. She smiled at him with a foamy mouth. Good night, Clark. Good night, Mom. He was sort of glad she couldn't kiss him on the head and sort of wished she would. His father lay in bed already, looking at the ceiling, not doing anything, in his work clothes. The TV was on, but nearly silent. It fluttered the room with a fluttering of sickly blue light. And then, for a moment, it looked like there was a dim cloud above the bed, as if his dad were smoking. But there was no smell, and of course, Mr. and Mrs. Smith didn't smoke. The haze swirled slowly and oozily above him. But when Clark squinted, trying to look directly at it, the smoke wasn't there at all. The room seemed darker and gloomier now, and all the colors looked dimmer. The silence was overwhelming. "Good night, Dad," Clark called out, more loudly than he really needed to. "Good night, love you," his dad said back, still staring at the ceiling. Clark made himself continue down the dark hall. Through her open door, he could see that Anna was also lying on her bed in her day clothes, but she was on the phone, fingers flying over the screen, actually doing something, sort of. "Good night," he said. "Good night, Squirt," she said, without bothering to look up. But there was still enough love in that to get Clark the last few feet down the hall to his own room. He turned on the light, changed into his video game pajamas, and closed the door, leaving it open the barest crack, of course. And then, before turning off the light again, he arranged his stuffed animals. In the center of his bed, he put his two biggest, Winkum on the right and Draco on the left. Winkum was his most beloved old horse and always held this position of honor. Draco, powerful with his fiery red felt breath and spiky tail, guarded the left side of Clark. Next and farther out from them were Bo Bear and Pog, always together. Pog was a small bunny, lanky and old, and easily transportable, but not that strong. And on the other side was the relatively new Dark Horse, whose fur was still smooth and whose flanks rippled with muscle. Beyond them were Flapfish and Dynamo, the Diprotodon, and Gribble, and Kevin, and Ducky, and Raccoon, and Baz. On the outside edges were the smallest stuffed animals. Random, cheap, weird creatures given to Clark by his uncle or won in a claw machine. The ones he would miss less if anything happened. This was a shameful thing to admit, but it was also the truth. All of the animals were faced out, away from where Clark would lie in the middle, safely between Winkum and Draco, so they could watch. The closet door, the windows, the scary cold floor he couldn't see from his pillow, shadowed corners. They were always on the lookout for monsters. Once everyone in his or her proper position, Clark turned off the light and hopped carefully into his place in the center. He would have preferred to hug Winkum facing him. It was more comfortable, but the horse needed to keep an eye out. So his tail licked Clark's neck. That's just the way it was. Then Clark said his goodnights to everyone he hadn't been able to tell personally. He couldn't say this for certain, but felt that this little ritual also kept monsters away. Good night, Grandma and Grandpa Smith, who were in California. Good night, Grandma Machin, who was just over in Hicksville. Good night, Grandpa Ken, who was wherever people were when they died. Good night, Aaron and Nathan, who were the cousins he never got to see. Good night, Chantel, Yankees rule, socks drool, who was his best friend from kindergarten and had just moved to Boston. And then, even though he knew they weren't real and he knew it was childish, he said goodnight to the others. Good night, Superman and Batman, he whispered. Neither of them had parents to say goodnight to them. Maybe they missed it, even after becoming grown-up heroes. Good night, Wonder Woman, even though she did have a mom. And then, finally, Clark was able to snuggle down between his two walls of stuffed animals, sheets and covers pulled suffocatingly overhead. He drifted off, dreaming of summer.